April 2019, I'm Bart Kamp, I'm talking here with Malcolm Blunt, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Malcolm's archive from the mid to the late 90s. Reason being is that I was given access to it and managed to copy over a few thousand pages, mostly talking about Dallas police, FBI, on the Dallas police, the evidence, also of course Texas School Book Depository. These are all matters that interest me most, and although we know that Malcolm these days is doing deep CIA research, but I thought, you know what, let's dig into the past, and of course it's not going to be easy to talk about things from 25 years ago, but why don't we talk about the very first beginning, because I remember that I think a couple of years ago when I did a talk with you, I asked you why you went into this whole document search thing, that you said, like, I've read a bunch of books and each book had a different opinion. Yep. And you wanted to know what the documents actually said, so you could actually follow your own trail than basically being let down a trail by various authors. So if I'm guessing correctly, you went to Dallas first.
Sure.
Right, so describe for me your first trip. Was it your first trip to the States, JFK related?
No, because I'd gone to the 93 ASK conference,
right,
and that was the 30th anniversary.
Closer to
the 30th anniversary conference. And I'd done that very much at the last minute. I think it was, I'd seen a couple of reports on the TV and in the media. It was quite a big event, and the 30th anniversary I think was a really big event for the Kennedy assassination. There was a lot of press coverage in the UK and in the States. So I decided to go over there and just take a look, and it was an interesting experience. You got to meet authors and all sorts of witnesses and all sorts of people. I think I remember saying to you, I met Rusty Livingston and his book, and discussed his book with him, which was First Day Evidence, I think. And quite a few other people were around then. Ed Butler, who was active in New Orleans and was in charge of INCA, which was this pro-Cuban organization funded by the agency, funded by CIA. And he was giving away copies of Southport's Written Red, his conversations with, the New Orleans conversations with Lee Harvey Oswald. And signed them. So, queued up with other people and picked up one of those copies. And then, you get, as I said to Bart, you get to look at the books, and you go from one book to another book, and initially you think, oh well, that's the answer to it, I can go away and get on with things, and then you get another book, it comes at you at a different angle, and I thought, well, at some point, you need to, as Bart says, I needed to go my own way. So we decided to go to Dallas. I was interested in US history, so I did some modules of history at the Dallas Municipal College, and later transferred to the University of Texas at Arlington. And during that period, I think it was about a year to a year and a half in Dallas, I mixed those things up. I did some days at college and some days in the city archives.
What's that like?
Which, they were, I think it was on the third floor of City Hall, the big building in Dallas. And they were run then by a lady archivist called Cindy Smolovic. And I think really she was one of the best people I've ever met as far as helping in trying to get get things sorted out, and just a real treasure, getting copies of things and pointing me in the right direction. It was exactly what you expect from a really good archivist. It was the correct treatment. And so I used to do quite a lot of hours there as well, searching. And during that period, I think it must have been, there was another conference in Dallas where John Armstrong did a presentation, one of his first, I think. And then he gave me his telephone number, and then I phoned him in Tulsa, and he was with another researcher, Carol Hewitt, I think, at that time, when they were going through the case. And then he came up to Dallas and visited with me. I was staying in the Manor House apartments in Dallas, if anybody knows that. That's almost opposite the Adolphus Hotel. So it's just down the road on Commerce. And I was on the 18th floor, apartment 1801.
Just in case.
1801. So, and we shot through some of the documents, and I said, well, it seems to me that I've almost finished up with the Dallas police files. I think the next step for me would be to go and take a look at what's at the National Archives up in College Park. So that's what I did. I went up to College Park and started to look at that massive JFK collection, which is at College Park. And it's very intimidating to everybody.
Yeah, that must have been really daunting, because you said like the other day, the Warren Commission collection was 400 boxes?
440 boxes of the Warren Commission files, 302 of the HSCA numbered files, 838 of the HSCA FBI subject files. And
so there's 440 of these?
Over 1,000 boxes of FBI field office files, 165 boxes of CIA segregated files. It's endless, there is just an enormous amount of material. And then sort of trying to work out which way you're going to go, whereabouts you're going to look. I mean, in a way it was more straightforward because the interest of John and myself at the time was, Oswald and the Oswald identity, and just pursuing that angle, trying to get some sort of idea of what the case was about in regard to Oswald and his background, his biography, and all that stuff.
Is that really daunting, being confronted with that many hundreds of boxes, and then basically you say, well, there you go. Now, of course, you didn't get all these boxes there and then right in front of you, but I mean, even if you get 100 of these boxes put in front of you, you say, like, forget about it, I'm walking away from this. I mean, never had that feeling?
No, not really, because I was lucky, you've met my wife, and, you get this cliche, my wife doesn't understand me. I think my wife probably does understand me, and she was quite content for me to spend time away from home, do the job, and stand in for me in my absence. I was very lucky, and if you have more time, a lot of people are very restricted on time. I know Phil Hopley. Phil, you said about you wish you had more time to do certain things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that I had that luxury. Our biggest luxury is time. Having the time to do something like that, I think, is so important. So, whilst it was intimidating, it was always a possibility. It's always a possibility that I could get further than most people in that collection.
Now, you said earlier that in the beginning it was pretty straightforward when it comes to the subject matter, good on Oswald. Can you tell us a little bit? Because what we know is that some of your material, that's what I know, some of your material has been used in Harvey and Lee as such, but in my opinion as well, a lot of it hasn't been used as such. And but so why don't we? Can you give me a short synopsis of what you found out from those years on Oswald, basically, as who he was or what he did?
Yeah, my take on Oswald was that there is for sure multiple use of identities, multiple use of individuals. I never bought in really to John's idea of Harvey and Lee, and when he told me a year before the book came out that it was going to be Harvey and Lee, I said, well, I'm not on board for that, because as far as I can see, it's a multi-layer cake. It's an intelligence operation. I mean, he may well be right. There may well be two individuals running around called Harvey and Lee at some stage. But I'm more comfortable with the intelligence use of the identity. I think that's where I'm on board. Although in New York City, I think I've said this to you, you can clearly, there is a delineation between the two Oswalds there, because you have this small runt of a kid that was interviewed by Dr. Currier and was photographed at the Bronx Zoo. And then you've got a big kid that was entered into the youth house and measured. And there's an 8-inch difference in height. And certainly when I went with John, we went down to Arlington Heights class reunion. We met some of the ladies that were girls then, that were at school with Oswald at Ridgely West. And they all remember a very big, husky kid. That's nothing like the small runt of a kid that was interviewed in New York City by Dr. Currier, who was photographed outside the Bronx. So there were definitely two individuals in New York. I'm not going to argue with John over that. And certainly in New Orleans, I see two people. I believe Palmer McBride. I know David Lifton does not. I know other people don't believe Palmer, but I knew Palmer very well, and he worked with Oswald for about 6 months, and his story's backed up by another guy called James Harrison Barnes, who I interviewed, and I think I'm the only person ever to interview Barnes. And Vance was surfaced really through the files. And if you read the files, none of the FBI interviews with Vance or the Secret Service interviews with Vance reflect the truth of what Vance remembered. Vance remembered in late 1957 that he stood in for Palmer McBride at the Pfister Dental Lab and was introduced to Oswald. And in January of 58, 31st of January, Oswald and McBride came to his mother's house when the Explorer rocket went up for the US. And he was very clear about those remembrances. The reason it all surfaced in 1966 was that his wife, Vance's wife, Maria Contreras, was getting a hard time for the INS in the US. She was Guatemalan, and there was a lot of problems with, as far as the INS were concerned. And then Harry Vance went down there and absolutely let rip. And during the conversation, or during the rant, he obviously shouted out that he'd known Oswald. And this got to the ears of the FBI and obviously the Secret Service, and they actually came down on him like a ton of bricks. When I spoke to Vance, he was still terrified. 31 years later, still terrified. He was a really fine. he was interested in the space program, and he worked for NASA Michoud, and he was a physicist. And after that, after all the hassle and harassment by the FBI, he moved south of the border to Tijuana and got a job teaching at a girls' school there. And hardly ever came over the border into the US. And I think I said to Bart, you know, what was the big deal? The big deal was he was confirming McBride's story. There was an Oswald in New Orleans in 57 and 58, when there was an Oswald in the Marines in 57 and 58. You can't have those two. So.
You said earlier about the FBI, one of many times where they just messed around with evidence, witnesses, what you just discussed as such. Of the material that I went through, one of the biggest examples of messing around with the evidence is, of course, the Recordec film that was taken with the Dallas police as such. You wrote an article about this 20 years ago. It's about 6-7 pages. While I was going through your archives as such, I came across folder after folder after folder that was titled Evidence, and some of them had their own little sub-stories, like The Notebook, which you and I discussed as well. That was 9 months after the deed. That a copy of The Notebook came out and was reported about in the Dallas Times-Herald, and the FBI pretended to do an investigation of finding out who made these copies and who they could put the blame on as such. But I just want to go back to a particular bit of this about the actual evidence film. In regard to the fact that it was barely used in Harvey and Lee. I think there's about that much text on one page about the actual matter. And I was of the opinion, when I read it in one folder, I was like, why didn't you spend more time on that? Because it's a brilliant example of the feds messing with things. Now, that there was no love lost between the police and the federals, that was a given already. But you went far deeper because you basically pointed out that, for instance, there were many missing images on the particular film of the recording evidence as such.
Yeah, I forget the number of frames that were missing.
About 250. 254. Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, this is the trouble when you're looking through your old files. Like he's pushed me into reacquainting myself with this stuff, you know. And it's years since I've looked at some of this material. And yeah, it was quite interesting looking through some of the, some of the older Armstrong files.
Yeah.
Some of the dialogue in there was interesting. I hadn't really looked at that for years. So that was quite interesting. But I mean, yeah, the evidence film is a story yet to be told, I think.
Yeah, because in a nutshell, it's basically, it's because of Bill Alexander. Because when the FBI said we want all the material, Bill Alexander says, we're going to record it first before we give it to the feds. So they took this, and it's called a Recordec camera, which is basically mounted onto a table. And it's like what you say, like an idiot-proof camera. You can't do anything wrong with it. It's just put a piece of evidence underneath and press the button, and it releases the shutter, and it records and it transports the film to the next frame.
It's impossible to go wrong.
Yeah, and yet the FBI managed to basically come back with a sack full of empty frames, basically. That's what the gist of it all is. The problem is also it's the paperwork that comes with it. The paperwork is highly confusing because the dates and the agents are all different. So in the space of a week, you've got half a dozen agents basically reporting about undeveloped film, or a film that has been brought back to the DPD, or a film that's been received from the DPD, and it just doesn't add up. None of it actually adds up. It's just a giant swap. But it shows a great deal about what the feds actually did with regards how they treated the evidence and how they brought it back as such.
Well, I think the difficulty was really that they had the evidence early. There was the great mass, according to James Callaghan, the great mass of evidence came up to Washington to their laboratory on the 23rd of November. that particular passage was deleted from his testimony. When the FBI put their evidence back in '66, they put it into the archives in '66. Mr. Callaghan was one of the team that transferred it from the FBI headquarters into the National Archives. So he put his deleted testimony back with his testimony. So that's the reason we found it. But, you know, it's just happenstance. The guy was a stickler. You know, you get the sense of truth when you read his testimony. There were some good guys in the FBI. They weren't all bad. I think Callaghan was one of the good guys. But when he was challenged by Eisenberg about the condition, somebody talked about the Department of Defense card being, you know, that was because it was inked out of existence and not cleaned properly. It wasn't desilvered. You know, they tested it for prints and they put all this stuff on it and they're supposed to desilver it. But in his deleted testimony, that's what he says, you know, that they didn't have time. They had hundreds of items to cover and get those back with it to the Dallas police within 2 or 3 days. Well, that's not a story you read. They tell us that they sent up about 6 pieces of evidence, not hundreds of pieces of evidence. It's a big difference. And he obviously got very peeved when Eisenberg challenged him about the condition of the documents, you know, because he was a meticulous man. He was saying that it's nothing to do with us. We were being pressurized to return all the evidence very quickly. So we didn't have time to desilver or clean the evidence properly. But thank God he put the stuff back in. He put his deleted testimony in '66. You know. And I mean, that's a great series. If ever you go, there for a week or a few days, ask for the FBI bulkies. It's it's a tremendous series of stuff. You know. You've got the Ivan Conrad lab files there. You've just got loads and loads of stuff. Every box is interesting. Can't, you know, just wonderful stuff. And Nara hid that stuff from me for 3 years. It wasn't on no finding aid, nothing. And then one of the staffers, one of the archivists, dropped out to me because I mentioned Ivan Conrad, and she said to me, "Oh, we've got Ivan Conrad lab files. They're in the FBI bulkies." I said, "Well, where are they on any finding aid?" "Oh," she said, "aren't they there?" I said, "No, they're not there." So then I managed to get a big index of the FBI bulkies. I mean, talk about not assisting researchers. You know, I think I've done my time with Nara.
That was my next question, actually. The difference between Dallas and Washington. From a research point of view. I mean, you've had lots of cooperation from Cindy in Dallas, and then you basically go to Nara, and at Nara you actually had an apartment for 6 months, living a stone's throw away from it, didn't you?
Yeah, just about a mile away. Yeah.
Right. Okay. A bit more than a stone's throw.
And then I would do the archives, and then switch with the University of Maryland, the UC, and do modules of US history there.
What were you doing there then?
I did diplomatic history at the US, and I did quite a few other modules there.
Oh, right. So you weren't just focused on Oswald and the Kennedy assassination?
I broke it up a bit with other things.
Right. But how different is that from Washington compared to Dallas? Not just attitude, but of course you've got lots more evidence there as well.
Well, the sheer quantity. I mean, it's millions and millions of documents. So it's not, as you said earlier, it's not easy to get your head around it. I don't know. You just look at, as long as the most important thing I found was to try and know as much as Nara knows about their holdings. And I tried thank God the review board pushed a lot of stuff in, and they pushed a lot of stuff in '98 when they finished, 1998, when they went out of business, and they were a terrific source of finding aids for me. I used to use their finding aids and call the archivist down and ask for various things, and said, well, where's that? And I said, well, I had the review board finding aids. So I said, well, here it is. You've got it. We used to get, I'm sure they weren't too pleased at times. I remember getting into the INSCOM files very early. That was the...
What are INSCOM files?
Army intelligence files from the 902nd. And first of all, they were very shocked that I knew they existed, and then there were problems with those documents because they came from INSCOM, they came from Army intelligence without a RIF cover, without a description cover, if you like. So they had to go back, and then they had to rejig those documents. But again, they were very interested, but they never found their way onto the NARA database, not for years. I remember when David Kaiser was researching up there, and he was looking for material on Carlos Prior, Cuban exile leader, and he mentioned that to me, and I said, well, you want to look at the INSCOM files? And he said, well, then he went away, and obviously looked on the database. He said, well, there's no INSCOM files there. I said, well, they have them. And so he called the guy down from upstairs, and the guy said, oh yeah, we have those files. And then David Kaiser absolutely let rip. It's quite embarrassing to see this archivist trembling there, really. But that's the sort of stuff you get. I mean, things. And it's got, in the last few years, it's got worse because NARA used the release, the 2017 release, as a sort of reason not to engage with researchers. They were too busy getting the 2017 release ready. So when you went to the National Archives, it was problematical to locate stuff. They had one guy there which they trained up, but he didn't really know what he was doing, and the other people there just absolutely didn't know what they were doing. So you would sit there, you would put a request in, and you would wait, and then your trolley would turn up with boxes, but they would be the wrong boxes, from the wrong files. So got a lot of aggravation there.
I know this from a friend of mine who went there as well a couple of years ago, in 2016 mostly. And he said as well, this is like the whole indexing system is completely different to what a person would expect it to be. Basically saying that, like, if he'd come up with a name or a RIF number as such, they would have to get, they'd say like, well, I don't know where that is, and they'd have to go through their own index card system as such. So that takes all time for them basically to go through as such. You order something at 9 o'clock, and if you're lucky, it arrives at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
I said to Bill, you can't. You used to be able to pre-order before you left, but that was all stopped. It's evolved into, in my opinion, into a very user-unfriendly place, which is sad. Because in year 2000, there was a guy that came up from the downtown archives called Matt Thorjan, and Matt had a totally different attitude. And, he was there for about a year, and then they moved him on. But boy, you could see how it should work. If you had a problem with a document, if a document was redacted or classified, you'd get on the phone to CIA or the FBI and check whether they could release it. You don't get any of that with this crew you've got there now. You don't do anything like that. We can't find it, we can't do this, We're not going to be asking any... The favourite phrase I get there from one person is, we're not going to be looking anytime soon. So,
Tell me, I've lost its name, but who was the gentleman who was sitting along at his desk right alongside the Warren Commission files and so forth, and just basically sat there and controlled them?
Marion Johnson.
Who?
Marion Johnson.
Marion Johnson.
He was the first guy in the National Archives. He had a desk actually based within the Warren Commission collection at the National Archives.
So it's like a guard.
This one. Gatekeeper.
Yeah,
Yeah,
gatekeeper.
right. Yeah, right. So, you know, there was obviously a lot of concern about the material. They wanted tight control, very tight control.
Now, while I'm going through your documents, I've used the term gold a few times. Or you'd
I've heard that.
Yeah, or you'd hear me scream and cuss and whatever because of the importance of the document. But can you list a few or think of a few that where you thought, bingo, awesome, this is amazing, this is a great find, whatever the subject? I mean, of course.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Gallagher one, I think, was really good. And I didn't get that until, I used to get the stuff sent over by a friend of mine in M-bags. You could get a huge bag of stuff sent over for about $20, you know, and you could hardly lift it. So it's about the stuff, you know, the weight of the stuff that you've been schlepping.
That's how you sent the Livingston files.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I sent them back, and I'd been going through this stuff, and I'd come across the Gallagher stuff, and recognised the significance of that. And coincidentally, I think it was at 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from John Armstrong saying, have you found anything recently? I said, yeah, I found interesting stuff about James Cameron, and the fact that the FBI grabbed the evidence early and they had it at the labs on the 23rd, and that testimony was deleted, but the guy put it back in with his actual testimony, so it's all together now. He said, can you send me that document? As he normally did.
yeah, exactly. Your collection is now being shipped. It's gone to the States.
Sure.
Why is that?
I think it's a good venue for it. I think certainly with Harry Livingston stuff, it really belongs over there, I think. And a lot of the stuff I've done, a lot of the research I've done, I think probably is more applicable for over there. So I'm happy for it to be there. I do hope it becomes more accessible. I think the situation at AARC is, there are good collections there, but sometimes it's a bit difficult to access. So, but I think that might change. Hopefully that'll change.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that'd be good. But at least we're making a start with it by showing your older stuff. You know, I think we probably have about 12,000 pages of the whole thing coming out over the course of the year on our website. There's one small bit that I just want to add on. Did you just quit doing the whole Oswald thing after the Oswald project or Harvey and Lee project?
yeah,
basically finished.
It got to the point, you know, where the book, John's book, was finishing up.
But were you finished?
On the Oswald thing, yeah, I think so.
Right.
To be honest, yeah, I think so. And you know, I wanted to look elsewhere, and I felt there were other avenues to explore, including, in particular, I think the agency stuff, the CIA stuff, which I really do think is important. Understanding how the stuff moves within the agency and which component relates to which component is important, because you get, too often we get, oh, the CIA did this and the CIA did that, and we don't really, we've got no idea about which bit of CIA we're talking about, or how they're doing things, how they're how they're running operations, how they're doing projects. It's just a black hole for many people, and there are too few people doing it. I mean, I think Bill Simkish tries to do it, but it's complex, and it's not an easy area. But when you break through it, you get a breakthrough. It can be big, you know. But you have to understand how the components relate to each other, how the documents are shifted around, who does what, where, and the influence of certain components of the agency compared to others. It's a big task.
But what I didn't know until 5 days ago was that you spent 4 years on doing the Cubans and the anti-Castro forces as such. And I always thought that you'd gone from the Armstrong Oswald thing straight into
No, even when I was doing the Oswald stuff, I was doing because I was interacting with Gordon Winslow down in Miami, and Gordon was always pushing the Cuban angle. So I was, even when I was doing Oswald there, but of course Oswald features in the Cuban stuff as well. So it overlapped. So yeah, I was doing the Cuban stuff, and that is massive too. I mean, that's just a huge area.
Just getting to know all these names is an issue.
It's just
And all the codes that are connected to it.
yeah, all the crypts.
Crypts,
yeah,
yeah.
Tons and tons and tons of material there. You could go on forever.
All right, that's pretty much it for me. If there anyone who wants to ask a question. Mike?
The Walker incident, the rifle shot through his window.
Mm-hmm.
The Dallas police, of course, sent detectives, and they got the bullet and testimony and stuff from various people. What's happened to all those Dallas police records, and in particular, where's the bullet? Because the one that turned up in front of the Warren Commission, General Walker said, was not the bullet that he found.
He was very, very consistent on that it wasn't the bullet. Even to the House committee, he said exactly the same. It was not the bullet. And he also said that the Dallas police had destroyed evidence related to the shooting. Actually, but there is a Walker file, I don't know if you could.
Yeah, there is a folder.
Yeah. So maybe Bart could.
In that.
Because there was an excellent article that you must know about by Alar Grossman, who lived through that in the Echo.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's, if you haven't read it, you really ought to. It goes into all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, General Walker was certainly of the opinion it was not the bullet.
Just be careful, the bullet, the photograph of a bullet that Allard shows is not the one that they found or put in evidence. It's one that he sort of made up as a Photoshop picture to show what Walker was describing as what he found.
Right.
It would be very hard to get any kind of ballistic evidence off that bullet shaft. There's virtually no shaft there. It's just a big mushroom.
Yeah, I remember seeing it.
I've got one more question. You're not known as an author, you're more like the force behind several authors, basically, by providing them information. Back in the day, were you just working exclusively with John Armstrong, or were you still sharing everything with other people as such? I mean, have you...
Yeah, that's a good question. I think back then I was sharing information with other people, but most of the Oswald stuff was obviously going that direction.
Right.
I mean, as I said to you, when you're going through these files, you're often seeing things, and you think it's unrelated to what your topic is, but it still looks interesting. So you put it to one side, and you just don't leave it in the file. You do something with it. You copy it for future reference, even though it may not be on the subject you're actually focusing. If you see, going through hundreds of boxes, there's no point in, if you see something interesting, thinking, well, I'll go back there. You might as well do it there. Get it done. Yeah, that's it.
Because you never may know whether it's still there when you go there next time.
Sure. Yeah.
Or whether it's redacted. I mean, you've been
I've had problems with that before. Some things tend to disappear. You know. Although Nara would deny it. So, and then some things happen. I mean, I remember there was a second page FBI document relating to the evidence bill, which I bitched about and I complained to the review board. And
I remember the letter.
Yeah, lo and behold, a couple of months later, went back to the file. The FBI file, the missing page was back. You know, it's
Ridiculous.
so you get that sort of thing.
The sharing element, it is important to you because right now I'm helping you with putting it on the internet.
I've always wanted to do that. I've always, you know, right from the get-go, you know, a lot of authors, it's like the attitude seems to be, it's mine or mine, that's it.
Yeah, I want an exclusive, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's it. You know, and I've got people I've worked with and supplied documents with, it's like, you know, well, don't share this with anybody else, you know, all the rest of it. You know, I don't sign on for that.
I agree.
The sooner the information out there,
Yeah. Yeah, it's just basically, it's just a matter of, the way I see it is just like planting seeds, because you don't really know what's going to happen. It may not be touched by anyone, but somebody either 6 days or 6 months or 6 years later basically picks up on it and turns it into something really beautiful. So you have no control or grasp of it, whether that's going to happen as such. You just don't know. But I think that's the beauty of it as well at the same time. Just like talking it out and see what's happening.
that's right.
So, alright, on that note, I'm going to call it a day. And I think,
Could I
Yeah.
make a couple of comments
yeah, go on.
about you?
Oh, God.
Well, yeah, I'm going to say 2 things. One, here's a guy that's connected to Greg Parker, and I'm a guy connected to John Armstrong. And really, we shouldn't be having a dialogue. You would think we shouldn't be having a dialogue, but we have a very good dialogue.
We do.
So,
They wouldn't.
and second, I think the amount of work that this guy is doing is just extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. Can't believe it. He wears me out. Absolutely wears me out.
For a good reason.
But I mean, yeah, fair play. What a great guy. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well done.